Salutations! Thank you for lending an ear to the Voice of the Times for Thursday, January 6, 2022. For today's editorial, Magna Carta for MSMEs yielding parvi eventus. As reported by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas over the weekend, Philippine banks again fell short of their obligation to make loans available to micro, small, and medium enterprises as of the end of the third quarter of last year. In this respect, the Great Charter for MSMEs has yielded nothing but minimal results and must be reassessed. The Magna Carta for MSMEs, originally enacted in 1991 as Republic Act 6977 and amended by Republic Acts 8929 and 9501 in 1997 and 2008 respectively, mandates that banks set aside 10% of their total loanable funds in order to provide financing for MSMEs. In spite of several rule changes by the BSP over the years to make it easier for banks to comply with the mandatory threshold, it has never been met, and the results reported by the BSP for the period ending September 30, 2021 are particularly disappointing. According to the BSP, of 8.44 trillion pesos in total loanable funds as of the end of the third quarter, banks set aside just 440.34 billion pesos for MSME loans, or only 5.21% of the total. That was a little more than half of the 826.64 billion pesos that should have been made available. At a time when the economy as a whole is working to recover from the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, this half-effort on the part of Philippine banks is disturbing and most unwelcome. MSMEs, as well known, constitute 99% of all Philippine business establishments, and precisely because they are smaller businesses, have been hit the hardest by the pandemic-induced economic downturn. The banks, of course, had their reasons for reluctance, expressed in the third quarter 2021 Senior Bank Loan Officer Survey conducted by the BSP. Respondent banks conveyed that the reported tightening of overall credit standards was mainly due to a deterioration in the profiles of borrowers and in the profitability of banks' portfolio, a less favorable economic outlook, and a reduced tolerance for risk, among other factors, the BSP explained. The overall problem seems to come down to two equally valid but apparently incompatible priorities. The country needs a strong, stable banking system. At the same time, the MSME sector, the backbone of the economy, needs access to credit in order to maintain its own stability and growth, which includes the significant contribution the sector makes to employment. The Magna Carta for MSMEs in its various iterations intended to meet that latter priority, but it has clearly failed to do so, and there is no reason to believe that continuing to try under the existing legal framework is ever going to yield the desired outcome. The BSP, to its credit, has tried to do what it can to make the system work, but the existence of the law also limits its options. We would suggest that the root of the problem lies in the somewhat lazy approach to actualizing what began as good intentions to support the MSME sector through an irrationally broad Magna Carta type law. This form of legislation has been so overused in this country that it has practically become a cliché, and more often than not, cannot be made to work as envisioned, even though multiple amendments and extensive crafting of implementing rules and regulations. With specific reference to the issue of credit availability to MSMEs, a more effective approach would be to craft a law that broadens the BSP's authority to establish lending threshold mandates on a more targeted basis for different classes of banks, or even for individual banks. Different banks have different markets, capabilities, and business priorities. A 10% mandate in one area or for one particular bank may be unrealistically high or low, depending on its circumstances and those of its customer base. This, of course, would require legislators to do detailed work and tap some real expertise on the issue rather than focusing on the performative show of crafting the biggest possible laws, which is a choice that may be met with some reluctance. However, passing laws that continually fail is worse than passing none at all. Voters and concerned stakeholders in the banking and MSME sectors should demand better. And that's the editorial for Thursday, January 6, 2022. For more news and information, get a copy of the Manila Times on print, subscribe to its digital edition, or log on to www.manilatimes.net. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and listen to the Voice of the Times.